Welcome to the American Small Business League podcast. I am Bruce DeTorres, and with me is Troy Green, who is running for the U.S. Senate as a Democrat in Oklahoma. His website is troygreen4senate.com, and Troy taught martial arts for over 30 years, and he founded Safe Haven, Oklahoma, a nonprofit fighting human trafficking and child exploitation. He also served as a police officer and worked in juvenile detention and private security. Thank you very much for joining me today, Troy. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here. Um,
Likewise. And as you know, the first part I want to hear all about you and why you're running. I really want to capture something great that you'd like to, use. It's the mid late April 2026 right now. I'll give you the floor. Where do you start as you answer those questions?
so I start with that I was raised in the Oklahoma foster care system. And how I ended up in that system is another long story that we don't have time for today. But I aged out of that system straight into homelessness. And so I'm really running because I've started from about as low as a person can be. And, having navigated multiple systems throughout my adult life, and that drove me to the jobs that I've had. Some jobs I chose, some chose me. I didn't choose martial arts. I just kind of found my way there as through help from another person to help get me off the streets. And I just never left. I actually still teach privately today and mentor some other coaches, former students who now have their own gyms. But I'm literally here to be a voice for the voiceless, the people that who I've always had to be in my life to survive, who still aren't being heard in Washington. Policies still aren't making it as low as I have been in my life. And so I just got to a point in my life where I thought it was time to put up or shut up. And I've really, like I said, tried to be what I needed throughout my life. And this is just a bigger version of that.
Yes, and I looked not as much as I want to on your website, and your story is there. Really well presented and great content.
Thank you.
Talk a little bit more about your evolution as a man, as an adult, as a leader, your skill sets, your values, your perspective, all the things that you offer to Oklahoma and that you want to use when you get to the Senate.
Well, the one thing that, you know, in my early youth, I had little control over my own life and the things that was happening to me. As I got into young adulthood and started surviving homelessness and looking for work, and how do you sell yourself to someone? I didn't really have the guidance that most people have to learn these things earlier in their youth, and so I really just relied on the two things that I could control, and that really was my word to people and my willingness to outwork everyone else in the room to get where I needed to be. Again, that I landed a lot of jobs that way. I landed a lot of promotions that way. I started out in the steel manufacturing business. By 19, I was a supervisor for a department that I started in as a grunt. With people in that department in their 40s and 50s answering to a 19-year-old. So again, just working my tail off, trying to lead by example. Again, being all the people I needed throughout my life. My work with my school, with my martial arts school and through law enforcement. I worked a lot of that time as a domestic violence officer. Working in juvenile services for me was, I just wanted to be a mentor to those kids and try and put them on a path that, a better path. I had been on their path before. So I think all these lived experiences are really what I bring to the table. I think it's unique that, we finally have someone who could go to Washington and know these real pains and experiences, to affect the policy that people need, people on the ground still struggling through some of these services.
Indeed. And also, to those who haven't met someone like you who's a clear success in really every area of life. Talk about, you're married, you've got this son in the Marines, and then into Safe Haven, Oklahoma. Talk about that, please.
So my wife and I have been together for 26 years. We have a blended family of five. Two of our children have Williams syndrome with, severe developmental disabilities. So that's another service that we've had to navigate over the years we're still having trouble with. Even though they're adults now, we still have to deal with that and deal with resources and things of that nature. Uh, I have a daughter who is a book influencer. She's she's our book nerd, and so you know they are all raised raised in our martial arts school. There are a lot of things about my personal life that they've actually had to learn in real time as I've kind of opened myself up and become vulnerable on the campaign trail. Safe Haven is the one thing that I needed to do. A lot of people don't realize and haven't talked about it a whole lot, but trafficking is how I ended up in foster care. And so I knew when I had the time, the resources, and the experience that I needed to do something like Safe Haven, that is exactly what I wanted to do. We got our 501c3 last year in June. So, we're still trying to get our feet under us and get, our network built so that we can figure out where we provide the most help. I really just want to help rescue people, but as an investigator, offering, wraparound resources and evidence collecting, things of that nature, whatever we can do to help in that realm. It's a very dark world. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. Thankfully, more eyes being on the Epstein saga are getting more people to pay more attention. So that's helping us a lot.
Talk about, please, your the case you make to represent Oklahoma in the Senate, to all the ears in Oklahoma, and also whichever question first, that aspect of the question, and then if you want to jump into, do you have a primary? When is it? What are you facing, and what are you really trying to make known in the hearts and minds of Oklahomans about what you want to do in the Senate?
Well, I mean, again, at my stage of life, looking backwards, trying to find who has actually heard me and heard all the different versions of me over the years, and I can't find anyone. So again, I'm here for, for real Oklahomans who are still struggling, people who are trying to make ends meet. Again, I've had dinner by candlelight because the power was turned off. I've had plenty of cold showers because the electricity's off. I've had my car repossessed. People are still, struggling through overdraft fees every week because their paycheck just doesn't stretch far enough. And quite frankly, I feel like we've been let down by, both parties. The working class are struggling, and it's just getting worse. Trickle down economics naturally isn't working. Private equity buying up, residential housing is just going to exacerbate our homeless issue. And what houses we are left for struggling families are going to be dilapidated and not hardly worth living in. So I'm here to be a voice for working Oklahomans and people who are navigating systems and just trying to get by. For crying out loud, millionaires and billionaires have had their shot. Where has it gotten us? And again, both parties have had ample time to fix things that we're still discussing today. Attacks on our public education system needs to be addressed. We don't have money problems in this country. What we have are priority problems. And we need people in there who are going to help reallocate funds where it's going to help the most people, not the richest people at the top.
Mm-hmm. Do you face a primary before the general?
I do. Yeah, there are actually five of us in this race now.
Right.
There were two, and then a gentleman jumped in February, and then we just had our filing deadline, and two more people jumped in at the last minute. It's
Okay.
probably going to force a runoff. Our primary election is June 16th. Once we go into runoff, that election is in August. And then, of course, the general is November 3rd. So, it's hard
Hmm.
enough to get people to show up to the polls once, and we've got to try and convince them to show up three times.
Hmm.
This seat is flippable. And a lot of people here on the ground believe I'm the guy to flip it. So, but we've got to get people to show up. Apathy is really how we've gotten where we are, not just in Oklahoma, but nationwide. So and that's some people need to know that their voice really does count.
Hmm.
I hear on the trail all the time. They're like, I don't do politics. My vote really doesn't matter. I said, but it does. The winner is 50% plus one, and I just need you to be my plus one.
Yes, and to say you say flip it, so the open seat or the one up for is Republican held, I assume, right?
Yes, well, it's the seat
Uh,
that Mark Wayne Mullen was sitting in.
all right,
He's taken the DHS job
all right,
appointed by Trump. So
all
there are
right.
five people on the Republican side as well. They could go to a runoff, but Kevin Hearn is a really strong, candidate in that race. He's currently a sitting U.S. senator.
Hmm.
He's got a lot. He's got the president's backing, so I assume it's going to be Kevin Hearn on the
On the
Republican
Republican side, sure. Talk about, please, your platform, your issues, your promises.
side. Well, I am part of the Take Back Congress initiative. A lot of people aren't familiar with this yet, but it's BAC is spelled BAC for balance and accountability. So we're a coalition. I was just in Washington, D.C. 3 or 4 weeks ago for our presser and having strategy meetings. And we're a coalition of now 100 candidates across the nation. And our five pillars are uh, congressional term limits, no ending the stock trading, a moratorium on lobbying, um, overturning Citizens United, getting big money out of politics, and a judicial code of ethics for the Supreme Court. Those are our five pillars that we all agree on. That as we win our seats, that we collectively these are the things that we're going to focus on. There are other things coming into play there, but again, uh, just those five things make drastic changes in our system and gives things back to the people, right? So that they have more say. And again, honesty, accountability, and the people want to feel part of the process. Again, I didn't just magically wake up one morning to be a totally different person because I decided to run. I'm still just a regular guy facing the same issues that everyone else is facing, and I wanted to feel like part of the a part of the system and part of the decisions that are being made. And so I decided to run. But again, people just don't feel like they're part of it anymore, and they need to be brought along with us. So two of the main things we hear, everybody goes to Washington and then we never see them again. I that's one of my biggest things is I want to prove. I've been proving people wrong my entire life, and I want to do that now. I want to prove that someone can go in there, do it right, not be tainted by the system. That's the other thing. If I were corruptible, my earlier life would have been way easier than it was. Getting where I am, honestly, has been quite difficult and has taken me, 50 years to do it. So again, I want to bring the public along and let them be part of this process and come back and include them in conversations about what's being done and what challenges we're facing.
Earlier, I think almost at the top of this conversation, Troy, you attributed your rise to a couple things, and the first one was being your word, and the second one outworking
Mhm.
everyone else. And that really resonates with me, as it does to any intelligent and decent person. Talk talk for a minute, if you don't mind, about the importance, and I'm going to say the nearly miraculous power of being your word?
So it's how I've gotten where I am today. It really is the driving force, and and using that to lead by example. Whether it's my children, now my grandchildren, my students. Um, you know, I had a guy who took a chance on me when I was young, and gave me an opportunity that I didn't feel I deserved, and he gave it to me because he had watched me from afar, and he just felt that that I always had kept my word to people, and some of that word is your labor, right? That's the one thing that I can control is my labor and the type of job that I do, and I learned that in foster care actually, uh, of all things, baling hay, and the guy I was baling hay for had said, "Man, those are some about baling big round bales of hay," and he said those are some really nice looking bales of hay. And I just hadn't thought about it. I just did the way they taught me to do it. But it was the first kind thing someone had said to me in a long time. And I realized that I had controlled how those bales looked. That was my labor. And I wanted them to look perfect from there on. So that's it. I mean, that's all there is to it. Having that kind of attitude and that work ethic, it culminates into leadership that people want to mimic. Don't do as I, that do as I say, not as I do. That doesn't work for me. Step out there and show me. You do, go ahead of me. And so, I haven't asked my children or my students or my fighters or anyone to do anything that I wasn't willing to do myself, and or haven't already done. There's a great story about my son who went into the Marines, and when he did his, I didn't get to go into service. I wanted to, had something that kept me out, and I felt really bad that he was going to go through this crucible. So I did one too, and there's a news story you can find online from a local TV station. I went out and stayed out as long as he did, walking up a highway carrying the same pack and carrying a flag, and stayed out there in the rain for 54 hours, because I felt so guilty that, he was doing something I hadn't done. So I did it with him. So sorry, I didn't mean to take up so much time with that, but
No, Troy, I wanted you to unpack as much as you wanted to right
sure.
there.
Thank you.
And my God, anyone who's ever tried to even just start their own business and keep it alive
Oh,
during the first year, let alone the 3 or 5 years, let alone as many years as you did, right there separates, you from the vast masses. And it's, there's a lot of things that come into why a business fails, but the
yeah.
tenacity to keep one and have it go as long as yours has, right? Is a huge thing. Um, Talk about a little more detail, if you don't mind, the vision of what you hope to accomplish in a term as a senator for Oklahoma. Teach me what's Oklahoma struggling with right now. What are your audiences glad to hear you talk about? And if you're repeating yourself, repeat yourself.
Sure. So I rarely get enough time to connect the dots, and I purposely avoid political bullet points, right? It seems like everyone who comes in says the same thing over and over and over. And I get the Democratic platform, I get it. And, we're all about working people, public education, affordable health care, things of that nature. And yes, all those things are true. But for me, everything starts with public education. And I'm going to tell you why, if as quickly as I can. Having, my particular circumstance as a child, had the rooms not been so full, maybe a teacher would have recognized that I had issues, right? So, and if you take my situation, for example, had I ended up going the way that some of my friends went and some people I shared rooms with in foster homes and youth shelters, I would actually be a burden on our taxpayers instead of being a taxpayer. So for me, our children are our future, and we need more resources to help public education for sure, And again, how are we going to bring industry and businesses back to Oklahoma? Who wants to move their company here and their employees here in a state that's 50th in education? So this is all connected, right? So without supporting our public education system and how we treat our children, and our DHS programs, right? They're stretched thin. Oversight is lacking because there just aren't enough people. And so if we give kids an upper hand, however that is, and I started a nonprofit in 2018 called 510 Youth Foundation to help with that very thing through my martial arts school, to help with tutoring and job search and teaching young people how to fill out, an application or do a resume, how to prepare for a GED if they're a high school dropout. I was. So things of that nature. And if we don't build up our young people and give them a better leg up so that they can go on and be small business owners, or, to help, work in these businesses that we need to come in, we're just going to spin out of control here. We're never going to get back up where we used to be. So, in the super majority here, all we've done is tumble down, in the numbers. The only numbers that we're first in now are negative ones, that, infant mortality rates and domestic violence and things of that nature. So these are the things that are on the front of my mind. Of course, health insurance and medical costs are about to get way worse once this big ugly bill kicks in after the midterm. And that's another thing. My wife's been a nurse for 20 years. She's on the front lines of this. We're both in grad school, so she's writing a lot of papers about what's coming down the pipeline. And, that's another big one. It's going to affect everybody.
Thank you. I grew up mostly on the East Coast, in and around New York City, New Jersey, Atlanta. Now I'm in California. I don't know anything about Oklahoma except what I've read in history books. So now I know that the things you've been talking about this whole conversation are obvious to Oklahomans, and now I understand them deeper. What are you in graduate school for?
So once Mason, he's our youngest, once he left for the Marines, I knew it was time for me. If I was going to do anything bigger than what I was currently doing, and I just had this, my brain was just aching for nourishment, and just to relive a process that I didn't get to experience when I was younger. So I got my butt in college, and I graduated undergrad last May and went straight into graduate school. I was really eyeballing law school, and then which I would have started this coming fall, but I decided to jump into this race instead. And law school is still on my mind, but I didn't want a gap. So, I graduated undergrad at a private university in Oklahoma City. I'm now at University of Oklahoma studying criminal justice, because it just kind of fits the things that I currently do for a living. I'm not sure where I go from here. I did undergrad. I majored in history. I minored in English and philosophy. Again, I'm kind of an amateur writer, and everybody keeps begging me to write a book about my life. And I thought, well, I probably ought to learn how first.
It's very impressive. The undergrad in history, was it what focus? American history?
I'm glad you asked that question. I actually, through my philosophy classes, I was taking medical ethics class, and I learned about some things in that class that I'd never heard of before. And one of them was the Tuskegee syphilis study down in Alabama.
Isn't that something?
And it made me cry in class. I couldn't believe it. And so that actually pushed me more into social history and racial injustice and things of that nature. I actually did a big historiography paper on the Tulsa Race Massacre. And then I did it as my capstone because I wanted to write it from my own perspective and my own research. So
That was
that's
in the
really my focus.
1920s. That massacre was in the 20s.
1921. Yeah. And I didn't hear about it until the centennial of it in 2021, when a guy down in Fort Worth wrote a book about it. And I just happened to look in a book bin one day and saw that book and picked it up. And that was it for me because I hadn't heard about that either. And I live in Oklahoma. So I couldn't believe it. And a question came up the other day about our economy, and this leads to small business. If you go back to Black Wall Street and the Greenwood District of Tulsa in 1921, they were turning a dollar inside their community 8, 9, 10, 11 times. That's small business, right? So all this money going out to Amazon and and all these big corporations, that's taking money outside of our communities most of the time. So that
I just want to mention, if I didn't in the intro, not only running martial arts school for decades, but you've got multiple black belts, right?
I do. Yes.
So just like your studies as a student now prove that when you tackle something, you roll up your sleeves, you dive into it, you immerse yourself into it, you become the greatest expert at it that you possibly can while you're trying to implement all kinds of practical solutions. And I assume and take it for granted you're a good collaborator. You can't succeed in the things you've succeeded at, Troy, if you didn't work well with others, as they say. So,
Sure. Sure. Well,
and
I didn't
yeah.
chase any of those things. I really didn't. It's just that, like you said, from that farmer telling me how great those bales looked that day, it's really just about the work ethic. And like you said, I'm kind of OCD and a perfectionist, and I'm very self-critical. I'm very self-competitive. I have to be better tomorrow than I am today in some fashion. Personal development is lifelong, and I'm just life's student. And I always feel like that I'm coming from behind, and I just can't learn things fast enough.
Well, yeah, I looked at your website to prepare for this. On the homepage, about half down, three quarters down, there's a nice 2-minute video of you talking to the camera, and you're there and here you talk from the heart, and you are to me the real deal. And I'm going to remember for a long, long time, Troy, your left foot and your right foot strategies that brought you up from where you were. Be your word and outwork everybody else, or pursue the quality. Like a job's not done until it says well done quality wise as you say it is. And look where it's taken you, and it'll give hope to everybody. I want to take advantage of the small business door you open, talk about those for a little bit, as you know, and then we'll wrap it up because this is unfolding just really nicely as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
Yeah, we reached out to you to introduce ourselves because we're an advocacy group on behalf of small businesses, and our niche is exposing the fact that every year federal contract dollars that are intended for small businesses go to big businesses. And the
Mhm.
SBA, which is oversees all this and makes sure that supposedly the federal government steers 23% of federal contract dollars to small businesses every year. The SBA says we did it, we surpassed the goal, everything's fine. But for decades, we have exposed that every year billions of dollars in such contracts go to big businesses, and the federal agencies report to the SBA, those are small business contracts. And the SBA says, thank you, small business contracts. And it's just not so. And the harm of that is this: those big businesses who get those contracts, Troy, they're already big. They create zero new jobs, whereas real small businesses would create a couple of million new jobs on top of the jobs small businesses create every single year. And I should have started by saying this: we are nothing but a small business nation. 99.9% of all businesses in America are small businesses with up to 500 employees. That's the government's general definition of a small business. We think that's too large because 98% of all businesses in America have less than 100 employees, and they create the vast majority of new jobs. They generate over half of GDP. They employ almost half of all workers in the United States. And for all the bells and whistles and confettis and celebrations and ribbon cuttings that the SBA presides over, we show on our website, ASBL.com, how the federal government in reality does next to nothing for our small businesses. 36 million small businesses that are supposed to have a lot more support, or at least the support they say that they're giving, and they're not. This alone, we think would unify left and right, Republican, Democrat, and go right into the wallets of mainstream America. Here's a huge point about all this. I'm fire hosing it at you, Troy. I know you can take it.
I love it.
It's this. It's the if small businesses are listening and they think, Bruce, I don't care. I cut hair. I fix garage doors. I'm never going to apply for a federal contract. Wait a minute. When the small businesses in your community get those contracts, hire all those new workers, they're going to need haircuts. They're going to need their garage doors fixed. Their kids are going to need ballet lessons. The whole economy would rise if we could get enough people in Congress, in the Senate, like you, pressuring and lobbying for this, submitting new legislation for this, and leaning on the administrator at the SBA or whoever's in the White House, because they're all in the pockets of big businesses. The 0.1% of businesses that are big businesses own and control Washington, D.C. for all intents and purposes. So we need to know about another scandal like we need a hole in the head, but this is ours. This is the one we've chosen to, ring the alarm and ring the bell and say, here you hear gather around and hear this story. And again, our site is ASBL.com. And I'm going to pause and get your thoughts about that before I briefly describe in a minute or two our Don't Cheat Women project. Or if you remember that we sent you, you could dive right into any aspect of all this. Troy, I'm all ears.
So, aside from my martial arts school, I also ran a pawn shop and an antique store for several years. I've having a retail store, and even with my gym, we have a small pro shop. So we deal with retail all the time, and dealing with suppliers, and I'll tell you a big challenge that I had with one of my stores is they always give us a list of MAP pricing, right? Manufactured, advertised pricing. And you're not supposed to go below, you can't advertise below this price. Well, I catch big companies doing it all the time. And so when I call my supplier to complain, they're like, look, you're buying 2 or 3 units a week. They're buying thousands of units a week. What do you want us to do? We can't lose that customer. So really, they're just kicking me to the curb and saying, I'm sorry, but there's nothing we could do. So they're trying to stay within the limits of the regulations. But look, if what people don't realize, we just talked about it. That dollar you talked about, with the ballet lessons, and I need that guy who goes around and cleans everybody's windows. He needs to make money too. So we're turning that dollar inside our community with these small businesses. And I'll tell you another thing we do is I let my employees work even though business is slow because they have rent to pay. I've skipped taking my own paycheck so my employees could have a paycheck. Corporations aren't doing that, right? They're giving big multi-million-dollar bonuses to their CEOs. And I don't understand if a product being made is making the owner more money, shouldn't the employee make more money too off of that product?
Well, that's the perspective we need representing us, Troy. That's for sure.
It doesn't make any sense.
No, and it couldn't be more urgent with the humongous investment in AI. That's
sure.
going down a road that just won't need humans anymore, and that implies something that would be such a huge conversation. I'm not going to pry into that. I just want to remind you about our Don't Cheat Women project, Troy, and get your thoughts about it. It's simply the fact that women own 40% of all businesses in America, and they sell what the government buys. But over 95% of all federal contract dollars go to companies owned by men. And we just want to raise from 5% to 15%. The goal, it's not even a requirement, the goal that 15% of federal contract dollars ought to go to women-owned small businesses. How is that even fair if women own 40% of businesses? It's not, but it's a step in the right direction. Not only would more jobs be created, but here's the real sweet spot, or the button we like to push, the hot button to wake people up. Because men earn and save more than women, they dominate in politics. It's easier for men to donate to candidates. They then have more influence with the winners. It's easier for men to run for office. Men hold roughly 75% of all seats in the Senate, the House, every state legislature, all presidents' cabinets, almost that many governor chairs, 90% of party leadership and committee chair positions. We need the whole human race in the councils of government guiding our affairs and making us the highest quality, most compassionate and encouraging and supportive culture and society that we could possibly be. Women are doing well by certain economic measures, graduating with higher degrees, I think starting more businesses than men, but boosting the amount of federal contract dollars that could go to the women-owned small businesses that sell what the government buys would help women pursue political equality. It's 2026. Your thoughts about that particular issue?
Well, you just kind of alluded to it. I mean, that's one reason why the thumb is there. The thumb is on the women. They're afraid if they're going to gain too much power and get in there and start winning elections. Like you said, I mean, women-owned businesses, they typically are, especially start building from the ground up. I believe, and other people that I know, they spend more time researching what they're going to do. They usually have a better footing before they start. 9 times out of 10. I mean, I haven't looked, but what is the success rate of women-owned businesses building from the ground up versus men's?
I want to know that number. I'm going to look that up.
I'm going to look it up as soon as we get done. I bet you it's pretty high. I bet you it's pretty high.
And on your site, I remember you mentioned, your aversion to these endless wars, as am I. And I'm such a student of history that I accuse the military-industrial complex of absolutely distorting and perverting our entire society since World War II. And if women were more, equally represented in government, maybe we wouldn't have the unnecessary perpetuation of all things military and all these wars.
There's no doubt that's true. No doubt at all. And again, we've got to get give women the freedom and the assistance they need to thrive. It's ridiculous. The world would be a better place, in my opinion, for sure. And another thing, I hate to backtrack, but these big corporations using subsidiaries to circumvent the systems that we're talking about are ridiculous. Again, where's the oversight? Why aren't we enforcing the regulations that are already in place? Mm-hmm. So again, these are the things, and supporting women-owned businesses is just part of that too. It all goes together. I plan to get in there and make some changes. I'm probably going to kick up some dust and knock a few doors open and make a few people angry. But we need some people in here who are tired of business as usual and the same old status quo. We've got to get, what do we do when AI takes over? What do we do? What's this going to come down to? People are going to need to, are we going to go back to some kind of a barter system? Are we going to be, waiting for a government allocation of water and food or whatever it is we need? People need to think about these things. And I think it all starts and continues with small business. I think that's where our focus needs to be right now.
Yeah, it would be hand in hand with a decentralization drive, which could help us and help keep cash in hand, because there's a whole concern about if we go all digital with currency, and that's a whole other level of technocratic enslavement one should study. Troy, tell me your website again and any other final thoughts that you have for me.
TroyGreenforSenate.com. Look, if we've been we've been quiet and nice for too long now. So I'm here to like I said, ruffle some feathers and try to get the work done. No one's going to outwork me. Somebody asked last night, a junior senator has very little clout. How are you going to build, how are you going to build the clout you need to get things done? Again, we've already talked about it. Being able to keep my word to people and being willing to outwork everyone in the room. I'm there to learn and listen. And I'm ready to get started. I'm so excited. I can't hardly contain myself.
Man, I wish I had a clone I could send to Oklahoma, work for your campaign. I really enjoyed getting to know you, Troy. I wish you the absolute best. Stick around after I stop the recording. But I just
Sure.
want to thank you again very, very
Thank you
much
for
for
having me. It's been a
being
blast.
likewise. And now I want to thank everybody for watching and listening today.